Senator Mathias, is the Kleindienst nomination dead as a result of the controversy over Flanigan's testimony?
Oh, I don't think it's dead at all. I think we're facing this very complex series of issues. This isn't just one issue. This isn't just the confirmation of a cabinet officer. I think we're now being forced under the impact of the ITT case to look at the inadequacy of the laws that Congress has enacted to control conglomerates and monopolies. I think we're being forced to consider the lack of publicity that exists in the relationships of great private centers of power and government. And part of this case, you know, is the very significant tax ruling made by the Treasury, which was made in secret, and I think we have to provide for more publicity in these areas. And it's the complexity of all these issues that has bogged down the confirmation process.
Well, how is the difficulty, the deadlock, going to be resolved between the President and the Congress over the executive privilege issue and Mr. Flanigan's appearance?
Well, you know, we've had a very recent example of resolving that deadlock. The Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate was very anxious to subpoena Dr. Henry Kissinger. And the same question of privilege arose, and it was resolved by a informal discussion between the Foreign Relations Committee and Dr. Kissinger without the use of the subpoena. And that might be a useful precedent.
Do you have any indication that the White House may go along with that suggestion in the case of Peter Flanigan?
I have no indication they will, but I think it's a possibility that ought to be explored and is being explored.
Senator, do you feel that there is some give in the White House position on this?
Well, they'll have to speak for that.
What do you think?
Well, I would hope they would consider it, yes.
Who is exploring this compromise position?
Well, various members of the committee are looking into it, and we'll see within the next day or so whether it has any promise.
What would you advise the White House to do at this point?
I think it would be useful. I think that the information that could result, it might be very helpful in resolving some of these very problems we're discussing.
An informal meeting?
An informal meeting, yes.
Senator, do you think that other Republicans could get hurt if Peter Flanigan doesn't appear on Capitol Hill? Could this really boil over and affect other Republicans this year?
The executive privilege question isn't a new one. We've had it before. It's a kind of confrontation between the different branches of government, and it does sometimes hurt innocent bystanders, and that's a possibility.
Is the Republican Party one of the innocent bystanders?
I think it is an innocent bystander.
So there's also a precedent that Chairman Adams came up to testify during the Eisenhower administration. Do you think that might be a valid precedent?
It's certainly one to consider, but they've been back and forth.
What's going to happen to the Kleindienst nomination if the President doesn't agree to compromise with the Judiciary Committee?
Well, that's impossible to speculate on now, but I think it certainly makes it more difficult to deal with it in the Senate.
He could lose.
Because this is a whole other issue, which is added to a bag of too many already.
The President could lose the Kleindienst nomination unless he compromises.
I didn't say lose it. I say it makes it more difficult.
Senator, why have you opposed issuing a subpoena to get Flanigan here?
The committee's considered that once. If we issued a subpoena and it was ignored, not responded to, that means that we have to go on to a citation for contempt. That brings the whole range of government into total conflict. And the country's torn apart enough as it is. I don't think we want to have a formal declaration of war between the executive and legislative branches, at least not while there is some hope of finding a middle ground, which I suggest is possible.
Senator, how about the idea of having him appear in regular session with a limitation on what he would talk about and what he would be asked about?
Well, that's a possibility. I think that ought to be explored too.
Has that been considered by members of the committee?
It's been discussed, yes.
Would an informal meeting satisfy the committee's rules and regulations? Would this answer questions for you?
That's not been determined. The committee hasn't made any decision.
Are you Senator, would you make contacts to the White House?
I have discussed it, yes.
Would you agree that this business of the informal meeting wouldn't wash since it went down by 9 to 4 yesterday, or something very similar to it?
Well, that was a preliminary discussion of it.
How would you describe the reaction to your own overtures to the White House on this issue?
Cautious.
Senator, with whom did you speak at the White House?
Well, I've spoken to several people down there, and we'll
They have names.
They
Mr.
can-
Flanagan?
Not Mr. Flanagan.
Ehrlichman,
No, not
Haldeman,
no.
Kissinger?
Timmons.
Do you get the impression the White House is also seeking a compromise?